Close your eyes and imagine standing in a place that no longer exists on any map. 2,000 years ago, merchants shouted prices in crowded marketplaces here. Children played in these streets. Lovers whispered beneath these arches. And then, slowly or suddenly, everyone left, and the jungle or the desert or the sea claimed what remained. Tonight, you walk among ghosts made of stone. Tonight, we explore the ancient lost cities of our world, the places that once pulsed with life and are now silent beneath sand, water, or forest. These are the ruins that archaeologists have uncovered and the cities that still wait to be found. This is archaeology made peaceful, history whispered like a bedtime story. Welcome to Drowsy Discovery. Over the next 2 hours, over 100 gentle facts will guide you through forgotten streets and buried temples. There is nothing to memorize, nothing to remember. Just listen and let your mind drift back through time. Have you ever wondered what secrets still lie hidden beneath the ground we walk on, waiting centuries to be discovered? You are not alone. If these journeys into the past help you find rest, consider subscribing and joining our growing community of peaceful learners. Now let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your body settling into stillness, like sediment drifting down to rest on the ocean floor. The ancient cities have waited thousands of years. They can wait a few moments more while you find your peace. Let us begin. More than 1,000 cities have been lost to time and then rediscovered by archaeologists. Across every continent, beneath deserts, jungles, and oceans, the remains of forgotten civilizations lie waiting in darkness. Some were great capitals that ruled empires, while others were modest trading posts where merchants gathered to exchange goods and stories. Earthquakes swallowed some whole, while others were buried so gradually by sand that their inhabitants simply walked away, generation by generation, until no one remained to remember. Archaeologists have catalogued over 1,000 such places rediscovered in the past 2 centuries, and yet estimates suggest many more remain hidden. Each of these cities once held the full weight of human experience, the births and deaths, the festivals and funerals, the quiet evenings of people whose names we will never know. The earth holds them like a patient archivist. Every lost city is a book waiting to be opened. A city can be lost in many ways, devoured by jungle, buried by volcanic ash, or simply abandoned and forgotten. The forces that hide cities from history are as varied as the civilizations that built them. Volcanic eruptions can bury a metropolis in hours, sealing it beneath layers of ash as though placing it in a time capsule. Earthquakes can topple walls and crack foundations until nothing remains but rubble slowly covered by wind-blown soil. Jungles are patient conquerors, their roots creeping between stones over centuries, their canopies closing overhead until temples become invisible. Rising seas have claimed coastal cities, their streets now patrolled by fish rather than merchants. War and plague have emptied others. Sometimes a city dies simply because the river that fed it changed its course, or because trade routes shifted. The manner of a city's loss shapes what remains. Destruction preserves differently than abandonment. Some lost cities were found by accident, stumbled upon by farmers, hunters, or children at play. Many archaeological discoveries began not with scholarly expeditions, but with simple chance. A farmer plowing a field strikes something solid and uncovers a marble statue that has not seen sunlight for 2,000 years. A shepherd searching for a lost goat finds walls covered with ancient paintings. Children near a riverbank notice strange coins washed up after a storm. The Terracotta Army of China was discovered by farmers digging a well in 1974, revealing thousands of life-sized clay soldiers guarding an emperor's tomb. In France, the Lascaux cave paintings were found by teenagers whose dog had fallen into a hole. These accidental discoverers rarely understand what they have found, yet their stumbling curiosity has rewritten chapters of human history. The Earth gives up its secrets to those who simply happen to be there. Fortune favors the observant. The concept of a lost city captured the imagination of explorers during the Age of Discovery. When European ships began crossing oceans in the 15th and 16th centuries, sailors carried maps filled with blank spaces and legends of fabulous places waiting to be found. Stories of golden cities fueled expeditions that ventured into unknown jungles and across uncharted deserts. The myth of El Dorado sent conquistadors deep into South America, while tales of Prester John's kingdom drew explorers into Africa. These legends reflected a belief that the world held wonders yet undiscovered, that somewhere beyond the horizon lay cities of unimaginable wealth, built by civilizations that had escaped the attention of the known world. The Age of Discovery was a search for lost places as much as a mapping of new ones, each expedition hoping to prove the stories true. Imagination and exploration have always walked hand in hand. The dream of finding something lost drives us forward. Many ancient cities were built without written records, leaving only stones to tell their stories. Writing is a recent invention in human history, and many great civilizations rose and fell without ever developing a system to record their thoughts. For these cultures, the buildings they constructed remain the only testimony to their existence, and archaeologists must learn to read architecture the way others read text. The size of a temple suggests the power of the gods worshipped there. The layout of streets reveals how people moved through their lives. The placement of granaries and wells speaks of practical concerns that occupied minds thousands of years ago. Without written records, we cannot know the names of kings or the poems they sang. We can only walk among their ruins, piecing together meaning from shaped stone and broken pottery. These voiceless cities challenge us to listen more carefully, to find meaning in absence as much as presence. Stones carry their own memory. Archaeology itself is a relatively young science, barely 2 centuries old in its modern form. For most of human history, people who dug into ancient sites were treasure hunters rather than scholars, caring nothing for context. The systematic study of the past through careful excavation only emerged in the 19th century, when pioneers realized that a broken pot found in its original location tells a story that the same pot in a collector's cabinet cannot. Modern archaeology developed methods for dating objects, recording exactly where each fragment was discovered and preserving delicate materials. Stratigraphic excavation, the understanding that deeper layers generally contain older remains, transformed digging from destruction into preservation. Today's archaeologists spend more time documenting than removing earth, aware that every excavation is also destruction. The field continues to evolve with new technologies. We are still learning to listen to the past. And from the foundations of archaeological discovery, we now journey to the most famous lost city of the ancient world. Pompeii was frozen in time when Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD. On an ordinary August morning, nearly 2,000 years ago, the residents of Pompeii were going about their daily routines, unaware that the mountain looming over their city was about to end everything they knew. When Vesuvius erupted, it sent ash kilometers into the sky, blocking out the sun and turning day into night. Over the following hours, this deadly rain fell upon the city, burying it layer by layer, while terrified citizens tried to flee or took shelter in their homes. By the time the eruption ended, Pompeii lay beneath several meters of volcanic debris, its streets empty, its markets silent, its people either escaped or entombed where they fell. The city remained hidden for centuries, gradually forgotten, until workers stumbled upon its ruins in the 18th century. Pompeii became a time capsule unlike any other. Tragedy and preservation are sometimes the same force. The volcanic ash that buried Pompeii preserved even the expressions on people's faces. When archaeologists began excavating Pompeii, they discovered something haunting. The ash had hardened around the bodies of those who perished, creating natural molds that preserved the shapes of people in their final moments. As organic material decayed over centuries, it left hollow spaces within the solidified ash. By pouring plaster into these cavities, archaeologists created casts revealing men, women, and children frozen in their last postures, faces showing fear or desperate hope. A mother shields her child. A man covers his face. A dog strains against its chain. These plaster figures are not sculptures, but impressions left by real people who lived and died nearly 2,000 years ago, their final moments captured with a fidelity that written records could never achieve. You stand face to face with individuals whose names are lost, but whose humanity remains. Death itself became a sculptor. Pompeii was not discovered until the 18th century, over 1,600 years after its burial. After the eruption of Vesuvius, Pompeii vanished from the landscape and from memory itself. The survivors had no reason to return, and within a few generations, the exact location was forgotten. Farmers plowed fields above its ruins without knowing what lay beneath. Local legends spoke vaguely of an ancient city somewhere in the area. It was not until 1748 that organized excavations began. What emerged from the earth astonished the world, a Roman city preserved in remarkable detail, its frescoes vivid, its mosaics gleaming, its streets still marked with ruts worn by cartwheels nearly 2 millennia before. The rediscovery of Pompeii sparked a fascination with the ancient world that influenced art and architecture across Europe. A city dead for 16 centuries changed the living world that found it. What is lost can shape the future more than what endures. Nearby Herculaneum was buried even deeper than Pompeii, preserved in a different way by pyroclastic flows. While Pompeii was slowly buried under falling ash, the neighboring town of Herculaneum suffered a different fate. Pyroclastic flows, superheated avalanches of gas and rock, swept down Vesuvius and engulfed the town in moments. The extreme heat carbonized organic materials instantly, turning wooden beams, food, and papyrus scrolls into charred but preserved forms. The density of the volcanic material meant excavation proved far more difficult than at Pompeii, and much of the town remains underground beneath modern Ercolano. What has been uncovered reveals an intimate portrait of Roman life, with two-story buildings still standing and wooden furniture in place. Scholars are still attempting to read scrolls from a library there using advanced imaging technology. The violence that destroyed Herculaneum also protected it from decay. Preservation and destruction walked hand in hand. Graffiti on the walls of Pompeii reveals the everyday thoughts and jokes of Roman citizens. Scratched and painted onto the walls of taverns, bathhouses, and homes, the graffiti of Pompeii offers an intimate glimpse into the minds of ordinary Romans. Visitors left messages declaring their love, complaining about politicians, boasting about athletic achievements, and scrawling crude jokes that would not seem out of place in a modern schoolyard. One inscription reads simply, "I was here." Another warns against a bad innkeeper. Political slogans urge citizens to vote for favored candidates. These are not the formal records left by emperors and generals, but the spontaneous expressions of bakers, merchants, gladiators, and enslaved workers. Reading them today, you hear voices that have been silent for nearly 2,000 years speaking as if they were your neighbors. The ash that buried these walls also preserved them. Ordinary words became immortal. Bread was found still sitting in ovens in Pompeii, carbonized but recognizable after 2 millennia. In the bakeries of Pompeii, archaeologists discovered round loaves of bread still resting where they had been placed to bake on that August morning nearly 2,000 years ago. The intense heat of the eruption carbonized them before they could decay, preserving their shape across the millennia. You can still see the marks where bakers divided them into 8 wedges for easy breaking, and the stamps that identified which bakery produced them. These are not ceremonial offerings or treasures of the wealthy but simple breakfast bread, the kind that would have been eaten without a second thought by laborers heading to work. The ovens that baked them still stand in their original positions, their domed shapes recognizable to anyone who has seen a pizza oven today. Roman baking techniques survive in modern kitchens across the world. The simplest things can carry meaning across millennia. And from the volcanic ruins of Roman Italy, we now travel eastward to a city carved from rose-red stone. Petra was carved directly into the sandstone cliffs of what is now Jordan. Unlike most ancient cities that were built stone upon stone from the ground up, Petra was sculpted downward into the living rock of rose-colored sandstone cliffs. The Nabatean craftsmen who created this city did not construct their monuments, but rather removed everything that was not monument, carving facades, tombs, and temples out of solid mountain. This approach meant that the architecture could never collapse, never be dismantled for building materials, never be scattered by earthquakes. The tombs remain precisely where they were carved over 2,000 years ago, their columns and pediments still sharp against the desert sky. Walking through the narrow canyon that leads to the treasury, you move through a corridor shaped by water over millions of years before humans shaped it further with their hands and tools. The city is inseparable from the stone that holds it. The city of Petra was lost to the Western world for over 1,000 years. After the decline of the Nabatean kingdom and the shifts in trade routes that followed, Petra faded from international memory and became a ghost spoken of only in legend. Local Bedouin communities knew the ruins existed and used some of the tombs for shelter, but to European scholars and mapmakers, the city became a myth, a place mentioned in ancient texts but no longer thought to exist in the real world. Rumors and fragments of travelers' tales kept the idea of a magnificent lost city alive across the centuries, but no Western explorer had laid eyes on it for over 1,000 years. During this long silence, Petra remained hidden in its mountain valley, protected by its remoteness and by the people who had made the desert their home for generations. The city did not disappear. It simply waited to be seen again. Some places hide in plain sight. A Swiss explorer named Johann Ludwig Burckhardt rediscovered Petra in 1812. Burckhardt was a remarkable figure who spent years learning Arabic, studying Islamic culture, and traveling through regions that few Europeans had ever seen or documented. Hearing persistent rumors of an ancient city hidden in the mountains of Jordan, he disguised himself as a Muslim pilgrim and persuaded local guides to take him through the narrow canyon known as the Siq. When he emerged and saw the treasury carved into the cliff face before him, he became the first Western observer to document Petra in over a millennium. His careful notes and sketches would ignite European fascination with the site, though he was careful not to reveal his true purpose to his guides, lest they suspect him of seeking treasure. Burckhardt died young, just 5 years after his discovery, but his journals ensured that Petra would never be forgotten again. Curiosity and courage opened an ancient door. And as you rest with these ancient wonders, let them settle gently in your thoughts like dust settling on a temple floor. There is no need to hold onto any of it. Let your breath slow, your muscles soften, and allow the stillness to deepen. The treasury of Petra, its most famous facade, was actually a royal tomb. Despite its name, the treasury, or al-Khazne in Arabic, was never a storehouse for wealth or precious goods. Local legends claimed that the urn carved at the very top of the facade contained treasure hidden by ancient pharaohs, and for centuries Bedouin fired rifles at it, hoping to break it open and claim the riches within. The bullet marks remain visible today. In truth, The structure was carved as a royal mausoleum, likely for Aretas IV, one of the greatest Nabatean kings. The facade combines Greek, Egyptian, and Nabatean architectural elements in a style found nowhere else in the ancient world. It stands nearly 40 meters tall, looking down into the narrow canyon through which all visitors must pass. The first glimpse of its rows, columns through the gap in the rocks, remains one of the most breathtaking moments in archaeology. A tomb became a symbol of wonder. The Nabateans who built Petra were masters of water engineering in the desert. In one of the driest regions on Earth, the Nabateans created a city that could support tens of thousands of people through sheer ingenuity and careful planning. They carved channels into rock faces to collect and direct rainwater, built cisterns that could store enough water to last through years of drought, and created an elaborate system of pipes and aqueducts that distributed water throughout the city. Some of these channels are still visible today, running along the walls of the canyon leading into Petra. Flash floods, which could destroy a lesser settlement, were tamed and turned into a vital resource. The Nabateans understood that water was more precious than gold in the desert, and they built their entire civilization around capturing every single drop that fell from the sky. Their engineering made the desert bloom. Control of water meant control of an empire. Petra's color changes throughout the day as the shifting sun paints the stone in different hues. The sandstone from which Petra was carved is not a single uniform color, but a tapestry of reds, pinks, oranges, and yellows layered through the rock over millions of years of geological deposition. As the sun moves across the sky throughout the day, different wavelengths of light illuminate different layers of the stone, transforming the facades from pale rose at dawn to deep crimson at sunset, and through countless shades in between. The Nabateans must have known this when they chose their building sites, positioning their most important monuments to catch the light at its most dramatic moments. Even the name reflects this quality, for Petra has been called the Rose City for as long as travelers have attempted to describe it. Standing before the treasury as the light shifts, you watch the stones seem to breathe and glow. Colors change while stone remains eternal. And from the Rose City of the desert, we now venture into the jungles of Southeast Asia. Angkor was once the largest city in the world, home to nearly 1 million people. At its height in the 12th and 13th centuries, the Khmer capital of Angkor spread across an area larger than modern New York City, making it the most expansive urban sprawl of its era. Its complex system of reservoirs, canals, and rice paddies supported a population that some estimates place it close to 1 million, making it the largest urban center anywhere on Earth at the time. The city was not a single dense settlement, but rather a sprawling network of temples, palaces, and residential areas connected by roads and waterways that stretched for many kilometers. When you walk among the ruins today, you are walking through what was once the heart of an empire that controlled much of Southeast Asia. The jungle has reclaimed the residential areas, leaving only the greatest stone monuments visible above the canopy. Once, 1 million voices filled these spaces. The temples of Angkor were swallowed by the jungle after the Khmer Empire declined. When the Khmer Empire weakened in the 15th century due to invasions, climate change, and the breakdown of its water management system, the population gradually moved away to other regions, and the jungle began its slow reconquest of the abandoned temples. Vines crept up the walls of sacred buildings. Trees sent roots down through cracks in the stonework, gradually prying apart what human hands had assembled over centuries. Monsoon rains washed soil over courtyards and doorways. Within a few centuries, the greatest city in the world had become a series of stone islands in an ocean of vegetation, known to local people but invisible to the outside world. The jungle did not destroy Angkor so much as embrace it, wrapping green arms around the old stone and holding it close. Nature reclaims what it lends. The forest and the temple became one. French explorer Henry Mauhat brought Angkor to Western attention in the 1860s. Mauhat was a naturalist traveling through Southeast Asia collecting specimens when he encountered the ruins of Angkor and realized he had stumbled upon something extraordinary. His journals, published after his death from fever in the jungle, described temples of immense size half swallowed by vegetation, their carved walls depicting scenes of gods and battles and daily life. Though local people had never lost knowledge of the temples, Mauhat's vivid accounts brought Angkor to the attention of European scholars and adventurers who organized expeditions to study and photograph the site. His drawings of roots wrapped around carved faces ignited imaginations across the world. Within decades, Angkor had become a symbol of lost grandeur and jungle mystery, though the civilization that built it was never truly lost to those who still lived in its shadow. The Western discovery was really a reconnection. Angkor Wat remains the largest religious monument ever built by human hands. Constructed in the early 12th century as a Hindu temple dedicated to Vishnu, Angkor Wat covers an area of over 400 acres, larger than any cathedral or mosque anywhere on Earth. Its central tower rises 65 meters above the surrounding plain like a stone mountain, visible for miles across the flat Cambodian landscape. The temple is surrounded by a moat more than 5 kilometers long, originally filled with sacred water that reflected the spires against the sky. Every surface is covered with intricate carvings depicting scenes from Hindu mythology, battles of the Khmer armies, and the activities of the people who built it. Each year, over 2 million visitors walk through its galleries, making it one of the most visited archaeological sites in the world. The devotion of the builders still speaks clearly today. Such dedication leaves lasting marks upon the world. The faces carved into the towers of Bayon Temple number over 200. At the heart of the ancient walled city of Angkor Thom stands the Bayon, a temple unlike any other in the world. Its towers are carved with enormous serene faces gazing in all 4 directions, their eyes half closed in peaceful meditation, their lips curved in slight mysterious smiles. Scholars believe these faces represent Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva of compassion, though some suggest they may be portraits of the king who built the temple. Standing within the temple's central maze of corridors, you find yourself surrounded by these watching faces wherever you turn, their expressions unchanging after 800 years. The effect is both calming and unsettling, as though you are always being observed by something patient and wise. No one knows exactly what the original builders intended visitors to feel. Some messages transcend the need for words. Trees have grown through the ruins of Ta Prohm, their roots embracing the ancient stones. When French archaeologists began clearing the temples of Angkor in the 20th century, they made a deliberate choice to leave Ta Prohm largely as they found it, with silk cotton and strangler fig trees growing directly through the walls, their roots draped over doorways and wrapped around carved reliefs like massive wooden fingers. The result is one of the most photographed sites in Southeast Asia, where the boundary between nature and human creation has been completely dissolved. Some roots have grown so thick that removing them would collapse the walls they embrace. The trees and the temple have become a single organism, neither able to survive without the other. Walking through Ta Prohm in the soft morning light, you witness a slow embrace that has been unfolding for centuries. Time moves at different speeds for different beings. And from the jungle temples of Cambodia, we now climb high into the Andes Mountains of South America. Machu Picchu sat undisturbed on its mountain peak for over 400 years. Perched on a ridge high in the Andes Mountains of Peru, Machu Picchu was abandoned sometime in the 16th century, likely in the chaos that followed the Spanish conquest, and then slowly forgotten by the outside world. Local farmers knew the ruins existed and occasionally cultivated the ancient terraces, but no maps marked the site, no explorers visited, and no scholars studied it. Clouds frequently wrapped around the mountaintop, hiding it from anyone who might have spotted it from the valleys below. The Spanish conquistadors, who destroyed so much Inca heritage, never found this particular citadel high in the mountains, either by chance or because those who knew its location chose not to reveal it to outsiders. For over 4 centuries, Machu Picchu remained in peaceful silence, its stones settling, its plazas growing green with grass. Some secrets keep themselves. American historian Hiram Bingham reached Machu Picchu in 1911, guided by a local farmer. Bingham was searching for the last Inca capital of Vilcabamba when a farmer named Melchor Artiga mentioned ruins on a nearby mountaintop and offered to guide him there for a small fee. After a difficult climb through dense vegetation and along narrow ledges, Bingham emerged onto a ridge and found himself surrounded by terraces, temples, and houses built with remarkable precision. Though he initially believed he had found Vilcabamba, later research would reveal that Machu Picchu was something different, a mystery that scholars still debate today. Bingham returned with expeditions that cleared the vegetation, photographed the ruins, and brought Machu Picchu to worldwide attention. The site became one of the most recognized symbols of ancient America. Bingham's name is remembered, but the farmer who knew the way is often forgotten. Discovery is rarely a solo journey. The Inca built Machu Picchu without mortar-fitting stones so precisely that not even a blade of grass can slip between them. The builders of Machu Picchu did not use mortar to hold their walls together. Instead, they shaped each stone so perfectly that gravity and friction alone keep them in place after 500 years of earthquakes that have toppled Spanish colonial buildings in nearby valleys. Some joints are so tight that you cannot slide a piece of paper into them, much less a blade of grass. Achieving this precision required incredible patience, with workers gradually grinding stones together until they fit exactly, a technique that may have taken years for a single wall. The result is architecture that survives earthquakes by flexing slightly and then settling back into position rather than cracking apart. Even today, engineers study Inca construction to understand how to build earthquake-resistant structures in mountain regions. Precision is its own kind of strength. The purpose of Machu Picchu is still debated, with theories ranging from royal estate to sacred sanctuary. Unlike many archaeological sites, where written records clarify what buildings were used for, Machu Picchu has left no texts to explain itself, since the Inca did not write in the way Europeans did. Scholars have proposed that it served as a royal estate for the Emperor Pachacuti, a retreat where he could escape the pressures of ruling an empire and commune with sacred mountains. Others suggest it was a training center for priestesses, a center for astronomical observation, or a sacred site where rituals connected earth to sky. The truth may involve all of these purposes and more, as Inca sites often served multiple functions depending on the season and the ritual calendar. Perhaps Machu Picchu was designed to be many things at once, a place where categories we separate today were unified. Not knowing everything can be part of the wonder. Machu Picchu was built to align with astronomical events, such as the solstices. The Inca were careful observers of the sky, tracking the movements of the sun, moon, and stars to determine planting seasons, religious festivals, and the proper timing of sacred rituals throughout the year. At Machu Picchu, several structures appear to have been designed with astronomical alignments in mind. The Intihuatana stone, a carved pillar at the highest point of the site, casts no shadow at noon on the spring and autumn equinoxes, and the Temple of the Sun has a window positioned so that sunrise on the winter solstice illuminates a specific point on the wall inside. These alignments connected the people to the rhythms of the cosmos, making visible the invisible order that governed their world. Each year when the sun rises in the same carefully framed window, it repeats a pattern set by builders who understood the sky. The stones still keep time. The Inca road system, connecting their cities, stretched over 40,000 kilometers. To govern an empire that stretched along the spine of the Andes from modern Ecuador to Chile, the Inca built a road network that rivaled anything in the ancient world. Over 40,000 kilometers of roads climbed mountainsides, crossed deserts, and spanned dizzying chasms on rope suspension bridges that swayed in the wind. Relay runners could carry messages from Cusco to the farthest provinces faster than Spanish horses would later travel the same routes. Tambos, or rest houses, stood at intervals where travelers could find food and shelter. Much of this network has been lost to erosion, landslides, and modern development, but substantial sections remain, including the famous Inca Trail that modern hikers follow to reach Machu Picchu. Walking these ancient stones, you follow paths worn smooth by millions of feet over centuries. The roads shaped an empire as much as the emperor did. And from the mountain citadel of the Inca, we now journey to the legendary city of Troy. For centuries, scholars believed that Troy was only a myth created by Homer. The story of the Trojan War, with its hero Achilles, the beautiful Helen, and the famous wooden horse, was considered by scholars to be pure fiction, a tale invented by poets rather than a record of actual events. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey were studied as great literature, but not as historical documents. The city of Troy, if it had ever existed at all, was thought to have vanished so completely that its location would never be known. Some scholars argued that the entire narrative was allegorical, representing philosophical concepts rather than real battles and real people. This assumption held for centuries until determined investigators began to question whether ancient poets might have preserved genuine memories of a real place and a real war buried somewhere beneath the soil of what is now Turkey. Fiction and history sometimes intertwine so closely that only the earth itself can reveal the truth. Heinrich Schliemann, a self-taught archaeologist, proved that Troy was real in the 1870s. Schliemann was a German businessman who made a fortune in trade and then retired to pursue his childhood dream of finding the city Homer had described in ancient verse. Using clues from the ancient texts and his own strong intuition, he identified a mound in northwest Turkey called Hisarlik as the likely site and began excavating in 1871. Within a few years, he had uncovered walls, gates, and treasures that he announced to the world as proof that Homer had been describing a real place. Schliemann's methods were crude by modern standards, and he often damaged or destroyed layers of history in his haste to reach what he believed was Priam's legendary city. Yet his persistence proved that ancient literature could serve as a map to genuine archaeological finds. A dreamer's obsession rewrote history books. There are actually multiple layers of Troy, with at least 9 cities built one on top of another. The mound at Hisarlik is not a single city, but a layer cake of human habitation stretching back over 4,000 years. Each time the settlement was destroyed or abandoned, new inhabitants built on top of the ruins, gradually raising the ground level higher and higher. Archaeologists have identified at least 9 major layers and dozens of sublayers, each representing a different era with its own buildings, pottery styles, and ways of life. Schliemann initially believed he had found Priam's Troy in one of the deeper layers, but later scholars determined that the city of Homer's poem, if it corresponds to any real war, was probably several layers above where Schliemann dug. The confusion led to decades of debate about which Troy was the Troy. History stacks itself up like sediment, waiting to be sorted by patient hands. The walls of Troy were so formidable that the Greeks needed 10 years and a wooden horse to breach them. According to Homer's epic, the Greek armies spent a decade besieging Troy without success, finally resorting to the famous trick of hiding soldiers inside a giant wooden horse that the Trojans mistakenly brought inside their walls as a trophy of their supposed victory. Whether this tale preserves a memory of an actual siege is debated, but the fortifications uncovered at Troy are genuinely impressive, with thick walls, towers, and gates that would have made the city difficult to capture with Bronze Age weapons. The walls of certain layers show evidence of violence, fires, and hasty repairs, consistent with a city under attack. Whatever really happened in the late Bronze Age, the story of Troy's fall resonated so deeply that it became one of the foundational narratives of Western literature. Strong walls inspire strong stories. The treasures Schliemann found at Troy were spectacular, though he often damaged the site with his aggressive methods. In 1873, Schliemann announced that he had found what he called Priam's treasure, a hoard of gold jewelry, vessels, and other precious objects that he believed belonged to the legendary king. He famously draped some of the jewelry on his young wife Sophia and photographed her wearing the ancient gold. Later analysis showed that the treasure came from a layer predating the Trojan War by 1,000 years, but its beauty was undeniable. Schliemann's excavation techniques, however, were destructive, as he dug trenches straight through layers that modern archaeologists would have carefully sifted for centuries of evidence. His haste destroyed irreplaceable information about the lives of ordinary Trojans. Passion and patience are both needed to listen to the dead. One without the other leaves important words unheard. And from the legendary ruins of Troy, we now travel to the ancient Indus Valley. Mohenjo-Daro was one of the world's first great cities, thriving over 4,000 years ago. On the banks of the Indus River in what is now Pakistan, a vast city rose around 2,500 years before the Common Era, at the same time that pyramids were being built in Egypt. Mohenjo-Daro, whose name means Mound of the Dead in Sindhi, was home to tens of thousands of people who lived in carefully planned streets, worked as merchants and craftspeople, and enjoyed amenities that would not reappear for millennia. The city thrived for centuries before being abandoned for reasons that remain mysterious, perhaps climate change, shifting rivers, or invasion. Its baked brick buildings slowly crumbled and were covered by sediment until rediscovery in the 20th century. Walking its ancient lanes today, you sense the echo of a sophisticated urban culture that flourished when most of the world lived in scattered villages. Complexity emerged early. The Indus Valley civilization had sophisticated urban planning that would not be seen again for millennia. The cities of the Indus Valley were laid out on a grid pattern with main streets running north-south and east-west, intersecting at right angles in a design that seems remarkably modern. Buildings were constructed with standardized bricks, suggesting centralized production and quality control. Residential areas were separated from industrial zones. The level of planning visible in these 4,000-year-old cities exceeds that of many European cities built 3,000 years later. Whoever governed these settlements understood that organized space creates organized societies, that the flow of people and goods requires careful thought. This vision of urban order would not be matched until modern times, when city planners consciously tried to impose similar principles. Ancient minds grasped truths we thought we invented. Every house in Mohenjo-Daro had access to fresh water and a drainage system. Perhaps the most remarkable feature of Mohenjo-Daro was its plumbing and sanitation systems. Nearly every house contained a bathroom with a drain that connected to covered sewers running beneath the streets, carrying wastewater away from living areas. Wells dotted the city, providing fresh water within easy reach of every neighborhood. This level of sanitation infrastructure would not be matched in most world cities, until the 19th century, over 4,000 years later. The Indus people understood that clean water and proper drainage were essential for health and comfort in a densely populated urban center. Their systems show careful engineering and coordinated construction that must have required significant social organization. The pipes and drains they built still trace lines through the excavated streets. Clean water is the foundation of civilization. The Great Bath of Mohenjo-Daro may be the world's oldest public water tank. At the heart of Mohenjo-Daro stands a large rectangular tank, carefully waterproofed with bitumen and surrounded by changing rooms and colonnades that once sheltered visitors from the sun. Scholars believe this great bath served some ritual or ceremonial purpose, perhaps purification rites similar to those still practiced in the region today. The structure demonstrates sophisticated understanding of water management, with drains to empty the tank and wells nearby to refill it with clean water. No comparable public bathing structure from this era has been found anywhere else in the ancient world. The care taken in its construction suggests that water held deep spiritual significance for the people who built it, a belief that persists in South Asian cultures to this day. Ritual and engineering met in this ancient pool. Some values flow unchanged through the millennia. The Indus script remains undeciphered, one of the great mysteries of ancient writing. The people of the Indus Valley left behind thousands of inscribed objects, from carved seals to pottery fragments, bearing symbols that scholars have studied for over a century without reaching consensus on how to read them. The script contains somewhere between 400 and 600 distinct signs, too many for an alphabet, but perhaps too few for a system where each symbol represents a word. Without a bilingual text like the Rosetta Stone to provide a key, deciphering these symbols has proved impossible so far. We do not know what language the Indus people spoke, what they called their cities, or what names they gave their gods and rulers. Their writing system guards its secrets with perfect silence across the millennia. Perhaps one day a discovery will unlock the messages they left. Until then, they remain voices speaking in a language we cannot yet hear. Let these undeciphered stories rest gently in your mind like letters on a page you need not read. There is no puzzle to solve tonight. Simply breathe and let your body sink deeper into comfort. Harappa, another great Indus city, gives its name to the entire civilization. Discovered before Mohenjo-Daro, the ruins of Harappa were so badly damaged by 19th-century railway workers who used its ancient bricks as ballast for train tracks that much of its original structure is lost forever. Despite this destruction, enough remains to show that Harappa was a major urban center of comparable sophistication to Mohenjo-Daro, with similar grid planning, drainage systems, and standardized construction. The site gave its name to the entire Harappan or Indus Valley civilization, a culture that stretched across a vast region larger than ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Thousands of settlements have been identified across Pakistan and northwest India, connected by trade routes that may have reached as far as Mesopotamia. The scale of this civilization was not fully appreciated until the 20th century. An entire world lay hidden beneath agricultural fields. And from the mysteries of the Indus, we now journey to the ancient kingdoms of Africa. Great Zimbabwe was a powerful medieval city that challenges Western assumptions about African history. In the grasslands of southern Africa, between the rivers Zambezi and Limpopo, stand the ruins of a city that was once the capital of a wealthy and powerful kingdom. Great Zimbabwe, whose name means great stone houses in the Shona language, flourished between the 11th and 15th centuries as a center of trade connecting the African interior to the Indian Ocean coast. Gold, ivory, and other goods flowed through its markets, making its rulers rich and influential. At its height, the city may have housed over 20,000 people within and around its massive stone enclosures. When European explorers first encountered these ruins, they could not believe that Africans had built them. The truth is that Great Zimbabwe represents one of many sophisticated civilizations that flourished in Africa. Stone walls tell many stories. The stone walls of Great Zimbabwe were built without mortar, rising to heights of 11 meters. The most striking feature of Great Zimbabwe is its massive stone walls, built using a technique called dry stone construction, where carefully shaped granite blocks are stacked without any binding material. The Great Enclosure, the largest structure on the site, contains walls up to 11 meters high and nearly 5 meters thick, curving gracefully around an inner space that may have served ceremonial or royal purposes. The builders achieved strength through the careful fitting of stones and the inward lean of the walls, creating structures that have stood for over 500 years. Walking along these walls, you can run your fingers over the joints where stone meets stone without gap or mortar between them. The skill required to build on this scale speaks of organized labor and architectural knowledge. Stone can express power without words. European colonists refused to believe that Africans had built Great Zimbabwe, inventing false theories about outside builders. When colonial administrators and explorers encountered Great Zimbabwe in the 19th century, their racial prejudices prevented them from accepting the obvious truth that Africans had built these impressive structures. They proposed that Phoenicians, Arabs, or even the biblical King Solomon must have been responsible, theories that persisted well into the 20th century despite mounting archaeological evidence to the contrary. Colonial governments actively suppressed research that pointed to African origins, preferring myths that justified their own presence. Today, the African origin of Great Zimbabwe is universally accepted by scholars, and the ruins serve as a powerful symbol of African achievement and resilience. The suppression of truth cannot last forever. History eventually corrects those who distort it. The kingdom of Aksum in Ethiopia once rivaled Rome and Persia in power and influence. In the highlands of what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea, the ancient kingdom of Aksum rose to become one of the great powers of the ancient world, trading with Rome, Persia, India, and Arabia. At its height between the 1st and 7th centuries of the Common Era, Aksum controlled a vast commercial network that stretched across the Red Sea and far into the Indian Ocean, bringing ivory, gold, and exotic goods to distant markets. The kingdom minted its own coins, developed its own script, and was among the first states in the world to adopt Christianity as an official religion. Persian writers of the 3rd century listed Aksum alongside Rome, Persia, and China as one of the 4 great empires of their time. Yet outside Ethiopia, this powerful civilization is often forgotten in world history courses. Great empires deserve to be remembered. Aksum's towering obelisks, some over 20 meters tall, still stand today as monuments to a forgotten empire. The most visible remains of Aksum's glory are its massive stone obelisks, carved from single blocks of granite and erected as monuments to kings and nobles. The largest standing obelisk reaches 24 meters into the African sky, while a fallen example would have stood an astonishing 33 meters tall and weighed over 500 tons if it had ever been successfully raised. These monuments are carved to resemble multi-story buildings, with false doors and windows etched into their surfaces. Some believe they were grave markers, while others think they commemorated royal achievements. Whatever their purpose, they represent engineering feats that rival anything in the ancient world. Obelisks still pierce the sky above Aksum, silent witnesses to forgotten ceremonies. Stone remembers what paper forgets. Timbuktu was once a center of learning, with libraries containing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts. The name Timbuktu has become a Western shorthand for the most remote place imaginable. Yet this city on the edge of the Sahara was once one of the intellectual capitals of the world. During the 15th and 16th centuries, Timbuktu was home to the renowned Sankore University and dozens of private libraries containing hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on subjects ranging from astronomy to medicine, law to poetry. Scholars came from across Africa and the Islamic world to study here, seeking wisdom in shaded courtyards. The manuscripts were written in Arabic and in local African languages, preserving knowledge that would otherwise have been lost. Many have survived to this day, carefully hidden by local families through centuries of conflict. A city called Remote was once a destination for the learned. Distance is often a matter of perspective. And from the kingdoms of Africa, we now cross the Atlantic to the cities of the Maya. The Maya abandoned their great cities long before Europeans arrived in the Americas. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in Central America, they encountered Maya people living in villages and small towns, seemingly unaware of the great stone cities hidden in the jungle nearby. The classic Maya civilization had experienced a dramatic collapse centuries earlier, between the 8th and 10th centuries, when major urban centers were abandoned one by one. The reasons for this collapse remain debated among scholars. Drought, warfare, environmental degradation, and political instability likely combined in complex ways that we may never fully understand. Yet the Maya did not vanish. They adapted, dispersed, and continued their traditions in new forms. Millions of Maya people live today in Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize, speaking languages descended from their ancestors. Civilizations can fall while cultures endure. Let that thought bring comfort. Tikal, hidden beneath the jungle canopy, was once home to over 100,000 people. In the tropical lowlands of northern Guatemala, the ruins of Tikal emerge from the rainforest like the bones of a sleeping giant. At its peak around the 7th century, Tikal was one of the largest and most powerful Maya cities, home to a population that may have exceeded 100,000 people. The city's influence extended across the Maya world through alliances, trade, and military conquest. Massive temples rose above the forest canopy, visible for many kilometers in every direction, like stone beacons in a sea of green. Carved monuments recorded the deeds of kings and the movements of celestial bodies. When Tikal was finally abandoned, the jungle reclaimed it so completely that later inhabitants passed by without knowing what lay beneath the forest canopy. Trees grew from temple steps, while roots split ancient stones. The pyramids of Tikal rise above the forest like stone mountains reaching toward the sky. The most dramatic features of Tikal are its temple pyramids, steep-sided structures that rise above the surrounding jungle in defiance of gravity and time. Temple 1, also called the Temple of the Great Jaguar, stands 47 meters tall and was built as a tomb for a 7th century king. Temple 4, the tallest pre-Columbian structure in the Americas at over 65 meters, offers breathtaking views across an unbroken sea of green forest. The Maya built these pyramids with limestone blocks quarried nearby, carried by human labor without the aid of wheeled vehicles or metal tools. Each pyramid took decades to construct and represented the accumulated wealth of an entire city. Standing atop these structures today, you can see other pyramids piercing the canopy in the distance. Stone mountains built by human hands still touch the clouds. Chichen Itza's pyramid creates an illusion of a serpent descending during the equinox. On the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts triangular shadows down the northern staircase of El Castillo, the Great Pyramid at Chichen Itza, creating the illusion of a feathered serpent slithering down the stonework to meet the carved serpent head at the pyramid's base. This phenomenon, whether intentionally designed or a beautiful accident, draws thousands of visitors each year to witness what feels like ancient magic made visible. The pyramid itself is a calendar in stone, with 91 steps on each of its 4 sides, plus a final step at the top, totaling 365. Chichen Itza flourished between the 9th and 12th centuries, becoming one of the most important centers of Maya civilization. Its blend of Maya and Central Mexican architectural styles speaks of cultural exchange across long distances. Light and shadow still dance together here. The cenotes of the Yucatan were sacred wells where the Maya made offerings to the gods. Scattered across the limestone landscape of the Yucatan Peninsula are deep natural sinkholes called cenotes, formed when underground caves collapsed to expose the water table below. For the Maya, these pools were far more than mere sources of drinking water. They were entrances to Xibalba, the underworld, and places where humans could communicate with deities and ancestors. Archaeological explorations of the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza have recovered gold ornaments, jade objects, pottery, incense, and human remains, evidence of offerings made over many centuries. Some cenotes still contain the skeletons of those who were sent to meet the gods. Today, swimmers cool themselves in the same waters that once held sacred meaning. The boundary between this world and the next was once believed to lie just beneath the surface of still water. Palenque's Temple of the Inscriptions contains the tomb of a great Maya king buried in jade. In the misty jungle-covered hills of Chiapas, Mexico, the ruined city of Palenque contains one of the most important archaeological discoveries in all of Maya studies. In 1952, archaeologist Alberto Ruslulia discovered a hidden stairway inside the Temple of the Inscriptions, leading down to a burial chamber deep within the pyramid. There lay the sarcophagus of Ka-Inish Janab Pakal, a 7th century king who ruled Palenque for 68 years. His skeleton was covered in jade ornaments, including a mosaic death mask that remains one of the most recognizable images of Maya art. The discovery proved that Maya pyramids, like Egyptian ones, could also serve as royal tombs. A king was laid to rest beneath stone, where he remained hidden for over 1,000 years. Sleep finds us all eventually, even the powerful. And from the Maya lowlands, we now journey to the heart of the Aztec Empire. Tenochtitlan was built on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the mainland by causeways. In 1325, according to legend, the Mexica people founded their capital on a marshy island in Lake Texcoco after seeing an eagle perched on a cactus eating a serpent, the sign their gods had promised. Over the following 2 centuries, this unpromising location was transformed into one of the largest cities in the world, with a population that may have exceeded 200,000 at its height. Engineers built causeways connecting the island to the mainland, constructed aqueducts to bring fresh water, and created floating gardens called chinempas to feed the growing population. Temples rose above the city, their walls painted in brilliant colors. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in 1519, they found a metropolis unlike anything in Europe at the time. The lake has long since been drained, but the city endures. When Spanish conquistadors first saw Tenochtitlan, they compared it to Venice and called it a dream. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, a soldier who accompanied Hernán Cortés, described the moment when the Spanish first saw Tenochtitlan from the mountains above. He wrote that some soldiers wondered if they were dreaming, for they had never seen or even imagined anything like this magnificent city of towers rising from a lake, connected by causeways to the shore. Markets, temples, grand palaces, and beautiful gardens stretched in every direction. The great marketplace of Tlatelolco was said to be visited by 60,000 people daily, selling goods from across the empire. Within 2 years, much of this wonder would be destroyed in the Spanish conquest. Yet the accounts of those first witnesses preserve a vision of a city that astounded men who had already crossed an ocean in search of new worlds. Wonder can precede destruction. The Templo Mayor stood at the heart of Tenochtitlan, a twin pyramid dedicated to two gods. At the very center of Tenochtitlan rose the Templo Mayor, a double pyramid with two staircases leading to twin shrines at its summit. One shrine was dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, the god of war and the sun, while the other honored Tlaloc, the god of rain and agriculture. The pyramid was rebuilt 7 times, each new version encasing the previous one like layers of an onion, growing larger and more impressive with each expansion. Archaeological excavation of the site has revealed offerings buried within the pyramid, including sculptures, obsidian knives, shells from distant oceans, and remains of ritual sacrifices. Today, a museum stands beside the excavated foundations, displaying these finds in the very heart of Mexico City. Two gods once looked out over an empire from this sacred spot. Their stone faces now rest in museum cases. Mexico City was built directly on top of Tenochtitlan, hiding the Aztec capital beneath modern streets. After the Spanish conquest, the great city of Tenochtitlan was systematically dismantled over several long and brutal decades. Its temples were torn down, its canals were filled in, and its stones were used to build churches, palaces, and colonial buildings. The new city of Mexico rose on the foundations of the old, quite literally covering the Aztec capital beneath paved streets and plazas. For centuries, Tenochtitlan existed only in historical accounts, old maps, faded paintings, and in the minds of historians who knew it had once been there. But the past has a way of resurfacing. Each time construction work disturbs the ground beneath Mexico City, new discoveries emerge. The Aztec past is not gone, it is simply waiting beneath the surface. Layers of history rest beneath our feet wherever we walk in ancient places. Construction workers in Mexico City still discover Aztec artifacts when digging new foundations. Every few years, news emerges from Mexico City of another accidental discovery beneath the modern streets. Workers installing a new metro line uncover a stone sculpture. Builders digging foundations for a shopping center find a cache of offerings. The buried layers of Tenochtitlan continue to yield treasures 5 centuries after the city's destruction. Some of the most significant finds have occurred during routine urban development, turning construction sites into archaeological excavations and delaying projects for months or years. A stone depicting the dismembered moon goddess Coyolxauhqui, discovered in 1978 near the cathedral, led to the excavation of the entire Templo Mayor precinct. The modern city and the ancient city share the same ground. Excavators and archaeologists work side by side beneath Mexican skies. And from the Aztec capital, we now journey to one of the oldest archaeological sites ever discovered. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey predates Stonehenge by over 6,000 years. On a hilltop in southeastern Turkey, stone pillars arranged in circles have overturned our understanding of early human history. Göbekli Tepe was built around 11,500 years ago, placing its construction at the end of the last ice age, long before humans developed agriculture, writing, or settled villages. The site predates Stonehenge by more than 6 millennia and the Egyptian pyramids by over 7,000 years. Massive T-shaped pillars, some weighing over 10 tons and standing 5 meters tall, were carved, transported, and erected by people who were still hunting wild animals and gathering wild plants for food. The effort required to build such a complex implies organization and shared purpose among scattered groups. This discovery rewrote the story of human development. The oldest temple known stands where few expected to find one. Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, challenging everything we thought we knew about early civilization. Before Göbekli Tepe was discovered, Most archaeologists believed that monumental architecture required settled agricultural communities. The long-held conventional wisdom held that farming came first, producing food surpluses that allowed some people to specialize in construction and ritual practice. Göbekli Tepe turns this sequence on its head. Here, hunter-gatherers who had not yet domesticated plants or animals came together to build elaborate stone structures, perhaps as a gathering place for religious ceremonies. Some scholars now suggest that the desire to build such sacred places may have driven the development of agriculture, not the other way around. Perhaps people settled down to farm because they wanted to stay near their sacred sites. Faith may have preceded food in the story of human advancement. The stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe are carved with images of animals, some of them predators. The T-shaped pillars of Göbekli Tepe are not merely architectural supports, but canvases for ancient art. They are covered with carved reliefs of animals, including lions, boars, foxes, snakes, scorpions, and birds of prey. Some pillars also feature abstract symbols whose meanings remain deeply mysterious to modern eyes. The animals depicted are often dangerous creatures, predators and venomous species that would have posed real threats to the people who carved them. Why would hunter-gatherers invest such enormous effort in creating images of the very creatures they feared? Perhaps these carvings served protective purposes, or perhaps they represent ancestors or deities. The stone menagerie at Göbekli Tepe preserves a window into a world we can only partly glimpse. Animals were carved in stone before humans learned to plant seeds. Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried by its builders, hiding it for over 11,000 years. One of the most puzzling aspects of Göbekli Tepe is that it was intentionally filled in and carefully abandoned around 8,000 years before the Common Era. The stone circles were systematically covered with soil, rubble, and debris by the very people who had built them, or perhaps by their descendants in later generations who still remembered the site's significance. Why would anyone bury such a monumental achievement? Perhaps the beliefs associated with the site changed, or perhaps the structures fulfilled their purpose and were ritually retired according to ancient custom. Whatever the reason, this deliberate burial preserved the site far better than it would have been if left exposed to the elements. Archaeologists discovered perfectly preserved carvings thousands of years old. Stone tells its stories to those who dig deep enough to listen. Only a small fraction of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated, with most of the site still waiting underground. After more than 2 decades of careful archaeological excavation, researchers estimate that only about 5% of Göbekli Tepe has been uncovered. Ground-penetrating radar surveys have revealed at least 20 stone circles still buried beneath the hilltop, each potentially containing more carved pillars and artifacts waiting to be discovered. The site covers an area of about 9 hectares, with structures extending across the entire hill in every direction. Future generations of archaeologists will have meaningful work here for centuries to come. Each new season of digging brings fresh discoveries and new questions about our distant past. We stand at the beginning of understanding a place that may transform our knowledge of human history. Patience is required when unveiling secrets 11,000 years old. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe suggests that religion may have come before agriculture. The traditional view of human development placed farming as the foundation of civilization. First came agriculture, producing surplus food that freed some people from the daily search for meals. Then came specialization, social hierarchy, and eventually monumental architecture and organized religion. Göbekli Tepe challenges this neat sequence by showing that hunter-gatherers built complex religious structures before they ever farmed. Perhaps the desire to maintain these sacred places encouraged people to settle nearby, eventually leading to the domestication of plants and animals. The need to feed the builders and pilgrims may have driven agricultural innovation in this very region. If true, this means religion did not emerge from civilization, but rather helped create it. Sacred spaces may have planted the first seeds of settled life. Çatalhöyük, another ancient site in Turkey, had no streets, and people entered houses through rooftop hatches. Not far from Göbekli Tepe lies another remarkable site called Çatalhöyük, one of the earliest known large settlements in human history. This Neolithic town, occupied from about 7,500 to 5,700 years before the Common Era, was home to thousands of people who lived in densely packed mud brick houses built directly against one another with no streets, alleys, or ground-level doors. Residents entered through ladders leading to openings in their roofs, which also served as chimneys for interior hearths and ventilation. The dead were buried beneath the floors of homes, keeping ancestors close to the living. Wall paintings and decorated sculptures adorned interior spaces, showing leopards, bulls, and human figures in vivid scenes. Life at Çatalhöyük forces us to rethink what a city can be. And as you rest with these whispers from the distant past, let them settle like sand drifting over forgotten floors. There is no need to remember which city or which century. Simply breathe and let the stillness surround you. And from the ancient sites of Anatolia, we now turn to the cities swallowed by the sea. Dwarka, the legendary city of Krishna, is believed to lie submerged off the coast of India. According to Hindu tradition, the great god Krishna founded and ruled the magnificent city of Dwarka, which was said to contain countless palaces, gardens, and temples of extraordinary beauty and splendor. The ancient Mahabharata describes how the city sank beneath the ocean after Krishna's death, swallowed by rising seas as a divine signal that an era had ended. In the 1980s and 90s, underwater archaeological expeditions off the coast of Gujarat discovered submerged structures that some believe may be remnants of ancient settlements. Stone walls, carved pillars, and what appear to be man-made formations lie beneath the calm waves. Whether these ruins represent the legendary Dwarka or merely ancient ports remains debated among scholars. The sea keeps its secrets close, revealing them only to those who dive deepest. The ancient Egyptian city of Heracleion was lost beneath the Mediterranean for over 1,000 years. Once one of the most important port cities in the entire Mediterranean world, the great city of Heracleion welcomed merchant ships from across the ancient world to Egyptian shores. Greek historians describe it as a major trading hub where precious goods from Africa, the Middle East, and Europe changed hands in bustling markets filled with merchants. But sometime around the 8th century of the Common Era, the city vanished from maps and memory, sinking gradually into the soft sediments at the mouth of the Nile Delta. Earthquakes, rising waters, and the liquefaction of the unstable ground combined to pull Heracleion beneath the waves. For over 1,000 years, the city rested forgotten on the seabed, covered by layers of sand and time. Its rediscovery reminded us how much of the past remains hidden beneath the waves. Divers discovered Heracleion in 2001, finding statues, temples, and ships preserved on the seabed. In 2001, French underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudiot and his dedicated team finally discovered the remarkable ruins of Heracleion about 6 kilometers off the Egyptian coast in Abu Qir Bay. They found colossal statues of Egyptian pharaohs and Greek gods standing tall, the remarkably preserved remains of at least 64 ancient ships, and hundreds of smaller artifacts protected by the layers of sediment. The Temple of Amun-Jereb stood largely intact on the seabed, its stones still arranged in recognizable patterns despite centuries resting underwater. Gold coins, bronze weights, and inscribed stelae helped scholars confirm the site's identity as the long-lost city of Herakleion. The discoveries continue to this day as divers slowly map the underwater cityscape. Time moves differently beneath the sea. Port Royal in Jamaica sank into the sea during an earthquake in 1692. In the late 17th century, Port Royal was the largest and wealthiest English city in the Americas, known for its pirates, its rowdy taverns, and its tolerance of virtually any behavior that brought profits. Some called it the wickedest city on earth, a place where fortunes were made and spent in single nights. On the 7th of June, 1692, a massive earthquake struck Jamaica, and within minutes, much of Port Royal had slipped beneath the harbor waters as the sandy ground gave way. 2,000 people died in the initial disaster, with thousands more succumbing to disease in the aftermath. The sunken city lies remarkably preserved today, a time capsule of 17th century Caribbean life. Divers have recovered bottles, pottery, and personal effects from buildings where they were left over 300 years ago. Some cities are preserved not by care, but by catastrophe. Rising sea levels after the last ice age drowned countless coastal settlements that are now lost forever. When the last ice age ended around 12,000 years ago, sea levels were about 120 meters lower than they are today. Vast areas of land that are now submerged beneath the oceans were once home to human communities living along ancient coastlines, fishing in shallow waters and gathering shellfish from tidal pools. As the glaciers melted and the waters rose over thousands of years, these settlements were gradually swallowed by the expanding seas. Most left no trace visible today, their wooden structures and organic materials long since decomposed. But in some places, stone tools, bones, and other durable artifacts have been recovered from underwater sites, hinting at the scale of lost heritage. Doggerland, once connecting Britain to continental Europe, is perhaps the most famous example. We walk on the surfaces of drowned worlds. And from the cities beneath the waves, we now turn to the legendary places that may never have existed. Atlantis is the most famous lost city of all, though it may have never been more than a philosophical allegory. No lost city has captured the imagination quite like Atlantis, the advanced island civilization said to have sunk beneath the ocean in a single catastrophic event. The story has inspired countless books, films, and expeditions, making Atlantis perhaps the most famous lost city in human history. Yet there is a fundamental problem. The only ancient source for the Atlantis story is the Greek philosopher Plato, who wrote about it around 360 years before the Common Era. Most classical scholars believe Plato invented Atlantis as a literary device to explore philosophical ideas about hubris and the ideal state. The story may have been intended as a warning, not as history. Yet the search for a real Atlantis continues to this day, driven by the eternal human hope that somewhere, somehow, the legend might be true. The story of Atlantis comes solely from Plato, who described it sinking beneath the ocean in a single day. In his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato described Atlantis as a powerful naval empire located beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. According to Plato, the great island of Atlantis possessed advanced technology, great wealth, and a formidable military force. The Atlanteans grew arrogant and attempted to conquer Athens, but they were defeated by the virtuous Athenians. Shortly after, the gods punished Atlantis for its great hubris, and the entire island sank beneath the vast sea in a single day and night of catastrophic earthquakes and floods. No other ancient writer mentions Atlantis, and no archaeological evidence has ever been found. The absence of any independent confirmation strongly suggests Plato created the story himself. Legends are often more powerful than truths. Explorers have searched for Atlantis in locations ranging from Santorini to Antarctica. Despite the scholarly consensus that Atlantis was invented by Plato, searchers have proposed locations for the lost continent on every inhabited continent and in oceans around the world. The Greek island of Santorini, devastated by a volcanic eruption around 1500 years before the Common Era, is a popular candidate because its destruction was indeed catastrophic. Others have suggested locations in Spain, Morocco, the Caribbean, and even beneath Antarctic ice. Each proposal requires reinterpreting Plato's account in creative ways, changing distances, dates, or descriptions to fit the proposed site. None has produced any convincing evidence. Perhaps the endless search tells us more about human nature than about any real lost civilization. We want mysteries. We need places still to discover, even if they exist only in imagination. El Dorado, the legendary city of gold, drove Spanish conquistadors deep into the South American jungle. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the Americas, they heard rumors of a city made entirely of gold somewhere in the interior of South America. This legendary place, known as El Dorado, the Golden One, became an obsession that drove countless expeditions into uncharted jungles and treacherous mountains. Adventurers endured disease, starvation, and hostile encounters in their search of golden streets and treasure beyond imagination. The most famous of these expeditions was led by Gonzalo Pizarro and Francisco de Orellana in the 1540s, which resulted in the first European navigation of the Amazon River. The searchers never found their city of gold, but their expeditions mapped vast territories and revealed an Amazon basin far more complex than outsiders had imagined. Gold remained elusive, but discovery came anyway. The search for El Dorado cost countless lives and yielded no golden city. Expedition after expedition set out in search of El Dorado, each hoping to be the one to finally discover the fabled city of gold. Most ended in disaster. European explorers and their indigenous guides died by the hundreds from tropical diseases, starvation, and violent conflicts with defenders of the forest. The hostile jungle claimed soldiers, priests, and adventurers alike, showing no mercy to those who presumed to conquer it. Some expeditions lost more than half their members before staggering back to civilization with nothing to show for their suffering. The dream of El Dorado persisted for centuries, driving brave and foolish men to their deaths long after any reasonable hope of success had faded. No such golden city was ever found. Perhaps the treasure was always a mirage shimmering above fever dreams. Some journeys teach wisdom through loss. The myth of El Dorado may have been based on a real ritual involving gold dust and a sacred lake. While no city of gold ever existed, the legend of El Dorado may have had a kernel of truth. The Muisca people of present-day Colombia practiced a remarkable and beautiful ritual in which a new chief was covered in gold dust and rode out to the center of Lake Guatavita on a ceremonial raft. There, he would wash the gold from his body as an offering to the gods, while attendants threw many precious golden objects into the sacred waters far below. Spanish conquistadors heard of this ritual and transformed it in their imaginations into a city made entirely of gold. Attempts to drain Lake Guatavita have recovered some golden artifacts, confirming that offerings were indeed made there over many generations. The Golden Man became a golden city in the retelling. Stories grow larger in the telling, especially when gold is involved. And from the myths that inspired explorers, we now turn to how modern technology is revealing hidden cities. LiDAR technology can see through jungle canopy, revealing lost cities invisible from the ground. LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging, uses powerful laser pulses fired from aircraft to map the ground surface with extraordinary precision. The key advantage of LiDAR is that some laser pulses pass through gaps in forest canopy, measuring the ground beneath even dense jungle cover. Computer processing can then strip away the vegetation to reveal the topography that lies hidden below. This technology has revolutionized archaeology in tropical regions, where centuries of forest growth have hidden ancient cities from view. Structures that would take decades to find by traditional surveying can now be mapped in hours of aerial scanning. The jungle keeps its secrets no longer. LiDAR has shown us that the rainforests of the world hide far more ruins than anyone had imagined. Technology reveals what time concealed. LiDAR surveys have discovered thousands of previously unknown structures hidden beneath forests. Since LiDAR began to be used widely in archaeology in the 2000s, the technology has revealed tens of thousands of previously unknown structures in forests around the world. In Cambodia, LiDAR mapping around Angkor revealed a vast urban landscape extending far beyond the known temples. In Central America, surveys have shown that Maya civilization was far larger and more densely populated than traditional archaeology had suggested. Similar discoveries have been made in forests from Madagascar to Southeast Asia. Each survey seems to reveal more than expected, challenging our assumptions about how many people lived in these regions and how intensively they modified their landscapes. The cumulative effect has been transformative. We now know that tropical forests were not empty wilderness, but home to thriving civilizations. Ancient cities emerge from the green. An entire network of Maya cities was found using LiDAR in Guatemala, rewriting what we knew about their civilization. In 2018, researchers announced the results of a massive LiDAR survey covering over 2,000 square kilometers of northern Guatemala. The findings were astonishing. Hidden beneath the jungle canopy lay the remains of more than 60,000 structures, including houses, palaces, defensive walls, and raised causeways connecting distant settlements. The survey suggested that millions of people had once lived in this region, far more than previous estimates had predicted. An interconnected network of cities and agricultural systems challenged the image of isolated city-states surrounded by empty forest. The Maya had transformed their landscape on a scale comparable to modern development. What had seemed like wilderness was actually a long-abandoned megalopolis. Every assumption changed in the light of new data. Satellite imagery has helped archaeologists find sites buried beneath sand in Egypt and the Sahara. While LiDAR works best in forested environments, satellite imagery has proven transformative in desert regions where sand and time have buried ancient remains. Infrared and other specialized imaging can detect subtle differences in surface composition that mark buried walls, roads, and settlements invisible to the naked eye. In Egypt, satellite analysis has identified thousands of potential archaeological sites, including previously unknown pyramids, tombs, and settlements. Across the Sahara, imaging has revealed ancient river systems and the settlements that once lined them during wetter periods thousands of years ago. Even when nothing is visible on the surface, what lies beneath often leaves traces that orbiting satellites can detect. The past leaks upward through the sand. Technology gives us new eyes for old mysteries. Ground-penetrating radar can detect buried structures without turning a single spade of earth. Ground-penetrating radar sends electromagnetic pulses into the earth and measures how they bounce back from different materials below the surface. Differences in density between soil and stone, between empty chambers and solid fill, create distinctive patterns that trained analysts can interpret as architectural features. Walls, floors, graves, and even wooden posts that rotted away long ago all leave signatures readable by this technology. Archaeologists can map entire buried structures before deciding where or whether to dig. This non-invasive approach has become essential at sites where excavation would be too destructive, too expensive, or where remains must be preserved in place rather than disturbed. Some sites are now known entirely through remote sensing, their secrets visible only in data rather than open trenches. We can now see beneath without breaking the surface. Citizen scientists now help identify potential archaeological sites by examining satellite images online. The sheer volume of satellite imagery now available exceeds what any team of professional archaeologists could examine in many lifetimes. To address this challenge, researchers have created platforms where ordinary people can help scan images for signs of buried archaeology. Thousands of volunteers around the world spend their evenings and weekends examining aerial photographs, marking suspicious features for expert review. These crowdsourced surveys have identified countless potential sites across Egypt, Peru, and other regions rich in buried heritage. The approach democratizes discovery, allowing anyone with an internet connection to contribute to understanding the past. Some volunteers have spotted features that professionals working alone had missed. Every pair of fresh eyes sees something different. Curiosity needs no credentials. And from the tools of discovery, we now turn to the people who dedicate their lives to uncovering the past. Archaeologists spend more time carefully recording finds than actually digging. Excavation is permanent destruction. Once a layer of soil is removed, it can never be put back exactly as it was. For this reason, modern archaeologists spend far more time recording what they find than actually moving earth. Every artifact must be photographed, measured, and mapped in 3 dimensions before it can be lifted from the ground. The surrounding soil is sampled for pollen, seeds, and microscopic remains. Detailed drawings capture spatial relationships between objects. Digital scans create permanent records of fragile surfaces. All this documentation ensures that future researchers can reinterpret the evidence even after the site itself has changed forever. The romance of discovery gives way to the necessity of preservation. What matters is not just what you find, but everything you record about how you found it. Patience is archaeology. A single site can take decades to excavate properly, layer by patient layer. Major archaeological sites represent investments spanning entire careers and multiple generations of researchers. Pompeii has been under excavation for more than 250 years, and still roughly 1/3 of the ancient city remains buried. Troy has been investigated by different teams for over 150 years. Göbekli Tepe may require many more decades to reveal all its secrets. Each layer of occupation must be removed carefully, understood fully, and recorded completely before the next layer can be addressed. Funding comes and goes, political situations change, and lead archaeologists retire or pass away, handing responsibility to successors. These long excavations become institutional traditions, passed down like precious heirlooms. Some archaeologists spend their entire lives working at a single site. Patience measures in generations. Indigenous communities are increasingly leading excavations of their own ancestral sites. For centuries, archaeology was conducted primarily by outsiders who removed artifacts from indigenous lands and interpreted them through foreign frameworks. This dynamic is gradually changing. Indigenous communities around the world are training their own archaeologists, establishing research institutions, and taking control of excavations at ancestral sites. In Australia, Aboriginal communities determine which sites can be studied and how. In North America, indigenous nations operate their own heritage preservation offices. This shift brings different questions, interpretations, and relationships between past and present. Oral traditions that outside researchers dismissed are now recognized as valuable sources of historical knowledge. The people whose ancestors built these places are reclaiming authority over their own heritage. Descendants now speak for their ancestors. Looting and illegal excavation destroy more archaeological knowledge each year. than is uncovered. The global trade in stolen antiquities drives widespread destruction. Looters tear through archaeological sites at night, ripping artifacts from context in their rush to find saleable objects. Everything they disturb but cannot sell gets destroyed or discarded. The relationships between objects, the soil layers that reveal chronology, the fragile organic remains that tell of daily life, all are lost when sites are ransacked rather than excavated. Dealers in antiquities create demand that fuels this destruction, and collectors who purchase objects without provenance provide funding. War and political instability make matters worse, leaving sites unprotected during conflicts. Some regions have lost much of their archaeological heritage to digging. Every artifact in a private collection may represent a destroyed site. The treasures we see represent knowledge we have lost forever. Climate change is both revealing and destroying ancient sites at an alarming rate. Rising temperatures present archaeology with a profound paradox. Melting glaciers are revealing artifacts preserved in ice for thousands of years, frozen bodies, leather goods, and wooden implements emerging from receding ice fields. Drought exposes submerged settlements in lakes and reservoirs, revealing lost villages that were flooded for hydroelectric power. At the same time, the very forces that reveal these sites threaten to destroy them. Organic materials that survived for millennia in frozen or waterlogged conditions decompose rapidly once exposed to air. Rising sea levels threaten coastal sites around the world. More frequent storms erode archaeological deposits faster than they can be recorded. Archaeologists face impossible choices about what to save when everything is threatened. Time runs out for sites that have waited centuries. We are racing against the changing climate. And from the challenges facing archaeology, we now turn to the stories that lost cities tell us about ourselves. Every lost city was once someone's home, filled with ordinary people living ordinary lives. The grand temples and palaces that dominate archaeological sites represent only a fraction of ancient urban life. Between and behind these monuments lived the cooks and cleaners, the potters and weavers, the children and elderly who made up the true fabric of these communities. They worried about their families, complained about their neighbors, celebrated festivals, and mourned their losses just as people do today. Lost cities were not museum exhibits inhabited by historical figures. They were living places where meals were cooked, babies were born, and prayers were whispered in the darkness. Every collapsed wall once sheltered sleeping families from the rain. When we explore ruins, we walk through the remnants of someone's entire world. The distance of centuries cannot erase their full and genuine humanity. They were us in different clothes. The objects left behind in abandoned cities speak louder than monuments. Monuments tell us what rulers wanted remembered. The humble objects left behind in homes and workshops tell us what people actually did. Cooking pots reveal what families ate and how they prepared their meals. Worn thresholds show where feet passed most frequently over decades of daily routines. Gaming boards suggest how people spent their leisure time. Oil lamps blackened by use mark the spots where someone sat reading or working late into the quiet night. Broken toys tell of children whose names were never recorded, but whose play was as joyful as any child's today. These small, overlooked artifacts accumulated without intention or plan, making them more honest witnesses than any inscription carved to glorify a king. The archaeology of the everyday reveals the truths that power sought to obscure. Ordinary things tell extraordinary stories of very human lives. Children's toys have been found in the ruins of nearly every ancient civilization. Miniature chariots and tiny clay animals appear in Bronze Age sites from Egypt to India. Dolls with movable limbs have been recovered from Greek and Roman contexts. Rattles made from dried gourds or clay turn up in civilizations separated by vast oceans and centuries of time. Children in ancient cities played games with balls, spun tops, and dragged wheeled toys behind them through dusty streets. The universality of childhood play connects us across the vast distances of time in ways that politics and religion cannot. A Roman parent who carved a wooden horse for their child shared something essential with every parent who has ever done the same gentle act of love. These small objects remind us that behind all the monuments and empires were families raising children who giggled, cried, and played just as children do now. Love transcends all centuries. Let these echoes of long ago lives rest gently within you. The people who walked these ancient streets once felt the same need for rest that you feel now. Let your body soften, your thoughts slow, and allow the quietness to take you. Love letters, shopping lists, and complaints about neighbors have survived on clay tablets for thousands of years. The cuneiform tablets of ancient Mesopotamia contain far more than royal proclamations and religious texts. Mixed among the administrative records are notes that could have been written yesterday. A woman writes tenderly to her absent husband, assuring him of her devotion. A merchant complains bitterly about receiving the wrong grade of copper. A tenant disputes a landlord who failed to make promised repairs. A parent worries about a child away from home. These glimpses of daily life survived because clay, once baked, lasts for millennia when buried in dry conditions. Paper and parchment decay, but clay tablets endure. The petty concerns of ancient people, their loves and irritations and everyday worries, connect to our own with startling intimacy. We still write notes. We still worry. Across the millennia, our humanity remains the same. The pets of ancient peoples are sometimes found buried beside their owners. Dogs were buried with their owners in ancient Egypt, in Rome, and in cultures around the world dating back tens of thousands of years. Some were placed at their master's feet in postures that suggest sleep. Others were provided with grave goods of their own, small bowls for food or favorite toys placed beside their remains. Cats received elaborate mummification in Egypt, wrapped in linen and placed in decorated coffins. Birds, monkeys, and even fish were preserved and buried with clear evidence of deep affection. These animal companions mattered enough that their owners could not imagine an afterlife without them. The bond between humans and their beloved pets transcends time and culture. We have always truly loved our animals. We have always mourned their passing. Some bonds need no words, only presence in this life and whatever comes next. Musical instruments found in ruins tell us that people have always needed song and rhythm. Bone flutes have been recovered from sites over 40,000 years old, making music one of humanity's most ancient and enduring arts. Drums, harps, and lyres appear in the archaeological record from virtually every civilization. The ruins of Ur yielded instruments so beautiful they must have been played at grand ceremonies, their shells and precious metals crafted with meticulous care. Simpler instruments, rattles made from dried seed pods, pipes carved from reeds, turn up in humble dwellings far from palaces. Music served the sacred and the everyday, marking births and deaths, celebrating harvests and soothing children to sleep. The universal need for melody and beat suggests something deep in human nature that cannot be satisfied by practical concerns alone. We sing because we must. So did they long ago under different stars. And from the humanity preserved in ruins, we now draw toward the philosophy of lost places. Every civilization believes it will last forever, and every civilization is eventually wrong. The Egyptians built monuments meant to endure for eternity. The Romans carved their laws in stone, believing their empire would never end. The Maya inscribed dates thousands of years into the future on their stelae, confident their calendars would still be used. Yet every great civilization eventually declined, fragmented, or transformed into something its founders would not recognize. The cities they built became ruins, their languages became mysteries, and their certainties became subjects for scholarly debate. This pattern repeats so consistently across cultures and eras that it approaches natural law. Nothing built by humans lasts unchanged forever. Recognizing this truth need not bring despair. It can instead foster humility and compassion for all who have built, dreamed, and inevitably passed. Every empire falls. What remains is memory. The ruins we study today will themselves one day become deeper ruins, studied by those who come after. Archaeologists who excavate ancient sites are themselves creating a new layer for future researchers to interpret. Our tools, our careful methods, and our interpretations will eventually seem as dated and limited as Victorian archaeology seems to us today. The museums that house recovered artifacts will one day become archaeological sites themselves. Even our written records may prove as difficult to interpret as ancient inscriptions are to us now. Given enough time, everything becomes archaeology. Our certainties will become questions, and our questions will be forgotten entirely. Future researchers will puzzle over our cities just as we puzzle over theirs. This recursive depth continues as far into the future as human imagination can reach. We study the past knowing we will join it. Time turns everything to silence. There may be cities still waiting to be found that will rewrite everything we think we know. Every generation of archaeologists eventually discovers something that challenges existing assumptions. The finding of a new site, the decipherment of a new script, or the application of new technology can overturn decades of scholarly consensus almost overnight. Cities as significant as any yet found may lie beneath forests, deserts, or ocean waters, waiting for the circumstances of their discovery. Perhaps entire civilizations flourished in places we have not yet thought to look, or vanished so completely that nothing visible remains above ground. The history we know is only what has survived and what we have found so far. The history waiting to be discovered could change everything. Somewhere out there, buried and forgotten, the next great revelation rests. Patience is required. The past keeps its secrets until it is ready. Some lost cities were abandoned peacefully, their people migrating slowly to new homes. Not every lost city tells a story of catastrophe. Some were abandoned gradually as conditions changed and opportunities arose elsewhere. Rivers shifted their courses, making irrigation impossible. Trade routes moved, leaving once prosperous ports without commerce. Mines ran dry, farms lost their fertility, or simply the next generation sought their fortunes in growing settlements over distant horizons. In these cases, the departure was orderly rather than traumatic. People packed their possessions carefully, said goodbye to ancestors buried in local cemeteries, and walked toward new lives elsewhere. The buildings they left behind slowly crumbled without maintenance, but no bodies lay in the streets, no burned roofs collapsed in ruins. Sometimes a city dies quietly, peacefully, like an elder who has lived a full life. Endings need not always be violent. Others fell suddenly, to war, to disease, to disasters both natural and human-made. The archaeology of sudden catastrophe tells darker and more haunting stories. Bodies found exactly where they fell, coins scattered as if dropped during flight, meals abandoned half-eaten on tables, all testify to ends that came without warning or mercy. Pompeii froze in a moment of terror. Cities burned by conquerors left thick layers of ash and the scattered bones of defenders who could not escape. Plague emptied towns whose survivors could not bear to return, leaving everything as it was when the dying stopped. Earthquakes collapsed buildings onto sleeping families. Floods drowned entire harbors in minutes. These violent endings preserve a terrible intimacy that gentler abandonments cannot offer. In the ruins shaped by disaster, we sense the fear, the confusion, and the desperate hope of those final hours. Silence follows the scream. The silence of a ruin is not emptiness, but memory compressed into stone. Walking through ancient ruins at twilight, one feels a peculiar and haunting weight in the air. The silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything that once filled these spaces and has since gone quiet. Footsteps echoed here once, many voices called from window to window, hammers rang against anvils, and children shouted in joyful play. All of that energy, all of those vibrations, have settled into the stones themselves. The walls remember every hand that touched them. The floors remember the countless feet that crossed them. This is not mysticism, but a form of attention, a willingness to imagine backwards through time and populate the empty spaces with those who once considered them home. Such ruins invite this meditation. They ask nothing from us except the acknowledgement that they mattered. Stone remembers what voices forget. In the end, every city is temporary, and every street will one day be forgotten. This is the final and perhaps most important truth that all lost cities teach. The settlements we built yesterday, the cities we inhabit today, and the grand metropolises we are planning for tomorrow will all eventually fall silent, crumble to quiet ruin, and be forgotten by everyone who walks upon the earth. This is neither tragedy nor cause for despair. It is simply the deep nature of things built by mortal hands in finite time. Knowing this, we can cherish what we have been blessed to have while we have it. We can honor the builders who came before us and show kindness to those who will follow. Every moment of human connection, every single act of creation, every whispered word of love matters precisely because it will not last forever. Impermanence gives meaning. Tonight, drift off to dream of ancient cities and awaken fully grateful. And with that, the echoes of ancient streets begin to fade into the stillness of the night. We have wandered through places that no longer exist except as stone and memory, from the ash-frozen streets of Pompeii to the rose cliffs of Petra, from the jungle temples of Angkor to the mountaintop sanctuary of Machu Picchu. We have touched the walls of Troy, walked the planned streets of the Indus Valley, and stood before the pillars of Göbekli Tepe. These places once held every human emotion we know, and now they rest in patient silence, waiting for those who wish to listen. If this journey through the ruins brought you peace tonight, consider subscribing or sharing with someone who might find calm here. There are more wonders waiting, more gentle nights ahead, and we are building a space where curiosity meets rest, expanding one peaceful listener at a time. Right now, as you lie here, these ancient cities continue their slow existence. Somewhere, a stone is falling in Petra. Somewhere, a vine is creeping across a temple in the jungle. Somewhere, an archaeologist is brushing dust from an inscription that no one has read for 1,000 years. The past does not vanish entirely. It waits. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy, and if they wish to close, let them. Take one slow breath in, feeling it fill your chest like air filling an ancient chamber long sealed, and then let it go, long and easy. Let your shoulders release, your hands uncurl, and your body settle like sediment coming to rest at last. The cities have waited millennia. You need not wait any longer to rest. Tonight, as you sleep, the lost cities of the world continue their silent existence. Wind whispers through the columns of Palmyra. Moonlight falls on the stones of Machu Picchu. Beneath the streets of modern cities, the foundations of older ones remain, layer upon layer of human lives compressed into the earth. You are a small, warm presence within this vast tapestry of time, peacefully resting among the wonders of all who came before. Sleep well, sweet dreams, and may you carry with you the quiet knowledge that even the mightiest cities eventually return to silence, and there is a certain peace in knowing that rest, in the end, comes to everything. This has been Drowsy Discovery. Good night.